Hello, I'm Tom Patterson with Flying Magazine. Welcome to our virtual event, What's Next in General and Business Aviation. And we're here today with Mark Malloy, who's blazed a trail in the aviation industry through a very successful career at Beechcraft Textron. And then he co-founded Partners in Aviation, a new kind of business revolving around shared aircraft ownership. As president of Partners in Aviation, Mark, you're based in Chicago, and I want to hear more about your personal story in a minute. But first, I would love to ask you a question that might appeal to our audience. You know, most folks know about traditional fractionals, but what's the differentiator here for PIA?
Fractional by definition, because there is more than one owner, but in the standard fractional model, that's multiple owners with multiple aircraft and an infrastructure around that. Ours is a little simpler. Ours is defined as two owners, one aircraft. That's it. That's all it is. So by definition, we are a fraction, but we're only a fraction of two. Once we get them past those concerns, which are universal to everyone we deal with, then it always seems to come back around to the value proposition. Then they can get more comfortable again talking about this, taking a $4 million airplane and turning it into a $2 million airplane. That's attractive, and taking whatever the fixed costs are of that airplane and dividing them in two. That all of a sudden the math comes back into focus after we can get through those four areas of concern.
How did you come up with the idea initially for PIA?
I started selling airplanes for Beechcraft in 1981 and loved it, and stayed in the Chicago area and did that in this geography for 34 years. And most of my clients we had that debate of how am I going to justify this? How am I going to justify owning this airplane that I really want, but boy, it seems like a lot of dollars, and I don't know how much I'm going to use it. So I spent a good part of my time with them, helping them justify that decision. And oftentimes, as we kind of analyze that, sharing the aircraft made sense. So partnership, the math of partnership always was pretty clear. It was everything else that was a bad idea. All of the yeah buts. So that's kind of where it started. Started challenging that idea of could we come up with a good way to fix the parts that aren't attractive in a partnership and keep the math that was. And I spent a couple of years with the smartest guys I know in the industry, legal, management, maintenance folks, and we worked out that question until we got to the point where we thought, actually we can do this, and we can do this well, and we can go back to the math of two owners splitting the numbers and really having the access that they need. So things that always come up when we're talking to somebody, that the same concerns is, how are we going to share this? How are we going to deal with when we want to use it and they want to use it? How are we going to exit it? What happens if, that's always what happens if, what if my partner has a bad day financially or has a change, and all of those. So there's really four pieces to the puzzle that we changed in terms of what a partnership is and what this program, and the four areas that we had to solve so that people could get comfortable, because everyone's attracted to the math, but afraid, if the word partnership doesn't raise the hair on the back of your neck, you're not thinking straight. It should. There's just about everyone we do business with who's had a bad experience in some partnership along the way. And so they come in with their defenses up, wanting to understand how this would work. And the four areas primarily that we had to solve were how you own it. And again, it's not a partnership, it's co-ownership, and we can talk about those differences. How you share it, how is that going to work? And we've got that solved. How you exit it, and we bring a little different philosophy than the old partnership model of when one of us wants to exit, we raise our hand and the other one has first right of refusal. That was kind of the old, on the napkin partnership program. This is a little more structured. And then the last thing is, how am I protected in this, financially and from a liability standpoint? So the industry has benefited from a little bit from what COVID has done, to a lot of other folks.
Who is the typical Partners in Aviation customer? Could you give us sort of a thumbnail sketch?
Really catering to clientele that small business owners, private owners, that in the past have owned an airplane by themselves, but struggled with that logic. If I'm using it about 100, maybe 150 hours a year, I've got my crew, I use it about 70% of the time for my business. I use it about 30% of the time for moving around personally. To in many cases, our clients have a second or third home. So that's our client. It's the entrepreneur. It's the private business person. It's often in our market. It's often the business owner that has now sold the business, and almost all of those folks still are in business in one way or another. They're just doing something different. It might be real estate, might be private equity. And they have maybe even as much as a 50-50 business personal use for an airplane, but all told, their total usage fits inside our box. And our box is 100 hours a year. That's who our client is. The low-end clients we serve are 50-hour-a-year clients. The high-end clients we serve are 150-hour-a-year clients. If they're flying less than 50 hours, they're probably not going to do what we do, because there's capital invested here. This is ownership, and you have to get up to around that 50-hour mark before it's worthy of that investment. But once you hit 50, and certainly around 75, that's where our clients are. If you get much north of 150 hours, and start pushing 200 hours a year, you're probably going to bend more towards sole ownership, the way the math and access to your airplane is going to drive you. So our space in there, if you will, our kind of between the rails there is that's 75 to 125 hour a year user. That's 80 to 85% of our clients. And that client is using the airplane 75% of the time for business and 25, 30% of the time personal use. Because a lot of those people, while they have the appetite for this, they don't have the need for the whole airplane. And that's our niche, is to find two operators that fly roughly 100 hours a year. And we're Match.com for that space in the industry. So it's been good.
Obviously, potential matches have to agree on a type of airplane. So if someone's flexible on the type of aircraft, how does that conversation work?
When a client comes and talks to us, we talk more about which category fits you. And this category, even though the manufacturers will all tell you theirs is the lowest cost airplane, the lowest DOCs, if they're a light jet, they're going to be all about the same in terms of cost. We're paying the crew the same, where the hangar rent's going to be pretty much the same for the competitive airplanes. And the FAA requires pretty much the same maintenance on all those airplanes, and many of them use the same engines. So we look at it and we say, okay, this is a light jet candidate based on what he's telling us, or a midsize or a super midsize candidate. I have a very specific model that's what they want. That's what we'll work towards for them. But we're all better served if they can tell us what they like in order and give us a little bit bigger net to cast in terms of category. Our process is a bit of a journey. It's not a plug and play. You just don't join the membership program on Friday and start flying on Monday. You're buying an airplane here. So there's a journey that goes through what has to happen to buy an airplane and do it correctly. And that journey for us used to take, in the early days when we started this, 6 months to find someone, that right partner in their geography. That 6 months, as time went on and more came into the program, turned into 4 months. That 4 months now is down to 60 days and sometimes 30 days. We want to be looked on as Colonel Sanders for just doing one thing and one thing right, and if we can do that, and own this space of two owners, one aircraft, and then a manager. That's what we want to continue doing, and just see if we can continue to grow it.
I love that, the Colonel Sanders, the Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I've also heard comparisons made to Match.com and Just Lunch. You know, it's kind of a dating service for people who want that partial ownership of an aircraft. It's been such a wonderful conversation, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Mark Malloy with Partners in Aviation. Where can we go to learn more? Tell us about where people can find you online.
Partnersinaviation.com. And on there, you'll get an overview of what we do. And then if you'd like to talk about it, the best thing is to schedule a consult, and love to visit with you on it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mark. I'm Tom Patterson for Flying Magazine. Thank you very much for watching.